Oh, welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Oh, it feels good to be home. It feels so incredibly good to finally be back at home, to be back in the comfort of my own studio, to be back in the comfort of my normal setup. Because if you paid attention last week, you'll know I did 2 shows instead of 3. I had this here microphone, which is a great microphone. I love this microphone. But this microphone's USB connection was not cooperating down in sunny Florida, down in sunny Fort Lauderdale, at the Hilton Marina Hotel. Not great Wi-Fi. We had potato cam going. This little sucker, every time that little USB wire kept popping on out. Like apparently Jose Alvarado was popping himself with weight loss medication. We're going to get there in a little bit. But it was a great week. It honestly was a fantastic week down in Florida. And had a great time. Great time. A lot of good business being done. Things are great. Things are great down there. It was a wonderful trip. But I got to say, by the time Friday rolled around, I was ready to get the hell out of Dodge. Now, I didn't think this one through far enough in advance, but I ended up at a rooftop party at the Hard Rock. And there was this DJ who I've never heard of before, who's apparently very famous, Steve Aoki. I had no idea who he was. And the only thing I kept asking was like, all right, what does this guy do? Like, does he do any of his own music? Like, what does he do? People were like, well, he throws cakes at people. And I was like, I'm sorry, what does that mean? He throws cakes at people. And then I learned around like 2 in the morning. I learned 2 in the morning, Friday morning, I guess technically, hours before I had to depart from sunny Florida. I'm standing on a rooftop bar with a bunch of people, many people, and I'm watching this dude throw sheet cakes, like legitimate sheet cakes, into the crowd. Hit a guy like 3 rows in front of me. I ended up with a little bit of icing right here. I have to say, a very nice whipped topping on that cake. But he threw like 12 cakes into the crowd. And I was like, all right, we're good. Anyway, it was a really nice week. Did 2 episodes last week. And of course, I knew that as soon as I made it known that I was going to be leaving town, I knew the Flyers would have news. So I took my stuff with me just in case. And then they hired Rick Tocchet. Snow the Goalie dropped an episode last Friday. It was last Friday. So that went up. If you missed it, Ant, Bundy, they were joined in studio by Bill Meltzer, then by Dan Hilferty and Danny Briere. And so like that show still got up and out to the people as well. But for last Friday, I was just like, I don't have time to do a show. I walked a mile to go find a really nice coffee spot, to go and get treats for the kids, go get them some muffins, get my wife some coffee. Like I went to do the thing, walked a mile. You know, it's like in the 90s down in Florida. You know, you kind of think at some point that like, oh, it's going to be pretty hot down in sunny Florida. And like you're used to it being like in the 70s, maybe the 80s up here. And then you get down there and it's this oppressive heat in the 90s. I didn't know what to do. So I did the only thing I could think. I walked a mile. I found a very nice coffee shop. I got the treats. I walked a mile back. And then I was like, oh, I got to get to the airport. And I had it kind of like mapped out in my mind. I was going to get up super early. I was going to do the show from the beach. And then I realized Fort Lauderdale has the worst Wi-Fi. I think I could land in an Eastern European town in the mountains and have better Wi-Fi than I had in Fort Lauderdale. That is true. I also couldn't find a very good signal from my cell phone. Otherwise, I'd done the hotspot thing. But I was going to like do the show by the marina or something. I had horrible signal everywhere. So that kind of went out the window. And I said, all right, am I going to do this from the airport? The answer was no. Because I will tell you, Friday's show was absolutely insane. The amount of flights that got canceled on Friday because of the storms that you guys were having up here, it was unfathomable. And I was happy that I had an afternoon flight. There are a few people I know who were supposed to fly into Philly, and I think one's supposed to fly into Newark, and their flights got canceled. It was like an earlier flight, and they had to like reschedule. So I guess I got lucky. All that's to say, it was a really fun week. I appreciate everybody who found me on Monday and Wednesday last week, those of you who went to go check out Snow the Goalie on Friday. Of course, Phightin Words did a Monday and a Friday show. They dropped another episode of that. What time did they go? They did a live show at noon today. So if you want your latest on Mick Abel and his first start with the Phillies, you can, of course, go over there and check all that out over on the Joy Media account on YouTube. You can also find it on the Phightin Words YouTube, and you can find it in the podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. I think that's set to go live this afternoon in the podcast feed. So in the meantime, you have YouTube. All right, so I've got a ton of stuff that I want to get to. I mentioned off the top the Jose Alvarado news, obviously probably the biggest news in Philadelphia right now. But then, it's the beauty of doing the show later in the day versus early, we got word the Nick Sirianni got an extension. I said, oh, that's very interesting. And we have to talk about the fact that last night in the National Hockey League, we saw the worst Game 7 of the postseason. A Game 7 so awful and lopsided it belonged in the NBA. We're going to talk about that because there are a couple of guys that I could absolutely see your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers maybe consider kicking the tires on. I think one is like pretty much going to stay pat. But the other one is like practically gone at this point. And so I'm very interested to get the feeling, get the pulse of the Philadelphia Flyer fan on YouTube, Facebook, and X in the comments below. I want to get into probably the biggest name coming out of Toronto that will almost assuredly leave the Maple Leafs. And I want to know if you won him as a Flyer. He's happened to put together 5 100-point seasons. He happens to be a guy who would represent an immediate upgrade on this team, but he is a guy that has built a reputation for not showing up in the biggest games. So all of that said, my friends, let's get into it. Before we do, we're going to go out to the comments. And I do see, by the way, Jim Cochran here saying, I'm sure we won't talk about them, but shout out to our only Philadelphia first-place team, the Union, the surprise of the MLS season. I wasn't keeping up with the Union down in Florida. I missed the last game. I saw they won. I saw they had a hell of a performance in net. They have been a bit of a revelation this year. Certainly not anything that we expected to see happen. But I saw that Carnell was talking about, here, real quick Union thing. Maybe we'll do a Union later in the week. But Carnell, their manager, was talking about the fact that they kept changing up the formations to piss off the opposition, to frustrate the opposition, and it ended up working. And it made me laugh because for years when Jim Curtin was here, we heard about the 4-2-3-1 and how, these guys couldn't handle another system. Ernie Stewart, the former director of whatever the hell, sporting director before Ernst Tanner, said how the team is incapable or how they need to learn how to play in one system first before you can start to mess with the formation, which I always thought was ridiculous if you're playing in the top league in the U.S. But I digress. Good for the Union. Really nice weekend and a very good season to this point. I think that we will be talking about them a lot more when the summer rolls around. So if you're not a Union fan out there, but you're okay with putting up with some Union talk from time to time, you'll probably get it on this show. Andrew Fawcett checks in, says, hello, Russ. Did you bring back any of the good stuff from Florida? I don't know what the good stuff is. I didn't get to Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's is like 3 hours away from Fort Lauderdale. I think the closest one, you have to go up the coast. If you're referencing cocaine, the answer is decidedly no. That shit ain't going anywhere near me. Cuban cigars, also a no. I don't know how you get Cuban cigars back up through security or whatever. Can you put them in your carry-on? Can you put them in your regular suitcase? I don't know. Didn't get any cigars. And I didn't bring anything else back of note. Just some muffins and a bag of coffee for my wife. And some goodies for the kids. Some fun stuff. Little trinkety stuff. Because anytime Daddy goes on the road for a trip, he's got to come back with something. I've now set a bad precedent. It is expected. All right. Hexram with the evergreen message. Hi, Russ. Love you, Russ. Hi, Hexram. Not sure if I love you back, but I do appreciate you for being here. I have to be careful. You just never know. Like, what happens if Hexram gets arrested? And we find out Hexram's a horrible human being. We can't have multiple episodes of me saying love you, too. That wouldn't work out. That wouldn't be great for me. Kenny Jones over on X says, happy sunny Monday, Russ. Is it sunny? I've been in the basement studio all morning and afternoon trying to catch up on some work things that fell through the cracks last week. This is what happens when you go on the road for a week and you're constantly in meetings and constantly have things going on at night. You occasionally miss a couple of things. And I had some emails that I had to fire off, so I've been working hard at it all day. Greg Bondarenko over on YouTube says, afternoon, Russ. Welcome back. Thank you, Greg. Great to be back. Andrew Fawcett noting that the hair is slicked back. So one thing that you guys don't get to experience anymore, with the show not being at 8:30, which it might move back to and it might not, who knows, I usually slick the hair back in the morning, then I let it naturally fall into that wonderful middle part that you're so accustomed to seeing at this point. But for whatever reason, I did it a little bit ago because my hair was unkempt. It was a mess. So now you're getting this. JH says the production value last week was rough. There wasn't even an Ethernet port in this hotel room. And if you remember, I was already mad enough about the parking lot. I left a negative review. They sent me not on Google. I left a negative review. They send the Hilton Honors rewards nonsense. Were you happy with your stay? No. What was wrong with the stay? I had a parking lot view in a hotel that calls itself the Marina. There are a lot of great rooms. I saw a parking lot, and there were car horns going off all night. And the fridge didn't work. I couldn't control the AC. The toilet wouldn't stop running. Not a great time, folks! I expect a comped room. That's what I expect for the future. I don't care about this one, but in the future. Jim Cochran also noting no bangs. Yeah, you get to see not the 1 head, 2 head, 3, 4, not a 4 head, not a 5 head. This might be a 7 head. But it's always been like that. So I never have to worry about a receding hairline. It's always been high. So we're good there. JH says, starting to think the Phils aren't going to get it done in the postseason this year. If you're just starting to feel that way, welcome. Yeah, shit's about to get real bad. Jose Alvarado, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. He certainly threw a big old monkey wrench into this one. It is going to be quite. Listen, if Dave Dombrowski's ever going to earn his money as the president of baseball ops, now is the time. If there was ever a Dave Dombrowski's trying not to burn the farm system to the ground, to make, unlike what he's done elsewhere, old Dave might be coming out. That old Dave might be kind of itching to get out. He might have to if they're going to try to patch some of the holes on this team, which, in fairness, he didn't address in the offseason. Connor Allen is here. Noting he's arrived. Ford says, now that you're back at home, what hotel did you stay at? I already said Fort Lauderdale, the Hilton Marina. It was okay. It was okay. Let's see. Amadeo asking if I grease the hair. No, this is au naturel. You can see. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful volume in this hair, yeah? It's not like greasy. It's beautiful. Absolutely lovely. Absolutely lovely. Let's see. Evan Atkins said the Snow the Goalie was propaganda without me. I listened to it. It's not the exact angle I would have taken on all of it, but I think the guys did a good job. Evan also probably wanted them to say how much they hated the Tocchet hiring, which neither of them do, so I don't know what you expected. Let's see. Connor says, 55 on Wednesday and Thursday. WTF are we doing, nature? It's supposed to get cold this week. I don't get it. Let's see. Tony Louie says, Bundy and Ant have been on a tear against fans that aren't on board with the Tocchet hiring. We missed your opposing viewpoint. I just want to clarify something because I did tell you guys this last week. The more I thought about the Tocchet hiring, the less angry I was, and I was just kind of apathetic about it. So I don't love it and I don't hate it. We're going to get to the Marner thing in a little bit. There's a part of me that thinks that the amount of times they talked about Tocchet being a draw for potential free agents, there is a part of me that wonders, like, if they're able to go out and get a fish, it's not going to be it's not like a Connor McDavid-sized fish, but if you can go out and actually get a free agent who isn't like a Kevin Hayes level free agent, does that change things for you? And I think that it probably does. And at that point, you probably do look at Tocchet and say, well, there's kind of, the living up to the expectation. Again, we're going to get there in a little bit. JH does not want Mitch Marner, calls him Bitch Marner. Woof. Says doesn't show up and then blames his teammates, like Matthews. That was pretty wild. Hey, here's some good news. Chris Menza says, just brought our son home from the hospital. I've changed diapers. That's contents aren't as soft as Marner. Hard pass. Chris, congratulations to you and yours on the birth of a son. That's awesome. That's very, very cool. Those initial baby poops, though, they are weird. We're not going to break that down into detail today. But those first, 2-3 weeks of baby poops, they are weird. If that's your first kid, congratulations. You have no idea what to expect, and it's going to be fine. If that's your second or your third or your fourth, you get it. If it's beyond 4, bless your heart. I have no idea how anybody goes beyond 4. 4 is crazy enough. I can't imagine having a 5th. But Chris, congratulations. I hope all is well. That's awesome stuff. That baby's poop is soft, and so if you're saying it's softer than or Marner is even softer than that poop, that's something. Seth Pamilia says, Bennett is going to win another cup. Why do people think he's leaving Florida? We'll get there as well. I don't know. People just seem to there is a weird thing that's happening in the NHL where you start seeing a lot of these names float, and I think what you've seen now in recent years is that players that are on teams that win or have a legitimate chance to win, they don't leave those teams, right? Like, Sam Reinhart was a free agent. He signed what is not a very good contract for a player of his caliber at his position, but he did it because there's no tax in Florida. And so it's almost like getting paid an additional $1 million or $2 million. If Reinhart really wanted to, he could have blown up the cap just in general. Like Reinhart could have set an all-time high for a center getting paid after the Panthers won the Stanley Cup last year. He chose not to. Bennett, I don't know what Bennett's going to do. Again, we'll get there in a little bit. Let me try. Maybe we'll just start with the Marner stuff, okay? Maybe we should, because I see a bunch of comments about Marner, so I guess it makes sense. All right, fine. We'll start with Marner. We'll go to Sirianni at some point, and we'll talk about Jose Alvarado trying to lose weight and instead losing the confidence and the love of an entire fan base. Do you love Jose Alvarado less than you did yesterday? 610-632. All right, so let's start with the hockey. Then we'll go to the Eagles, and then we'll go to the Phillies. And I'm only starting with hockey because there's so many comments here, and I have to make sure that we're addressing the needs of the people. So I'm watching Game 7 last night with a friend, and he and I had kind of gone back and forth about what to expect. And before my kids went to bed, I said, who do you guys think is going to win, the Maple Leafs or the Panthers? And my kids were like, oh, the Panthers. And I was like, yeah, but like, you really think the Panthers are going to win on the road? Game 7. And they're like, yeah. And I said, why? I said, I don't know. Panther could rip up a Maple Leaf. I was like, all right, good logic. And I was kind of talking my way through it, and I thought I was rooting for the Leafs because next month I'm going to be on a work trip in Toronto, and it happens to coincide with the dates of the Stanley Cup Final. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to be in Toronto if the Leafs have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. I could maybe try to get credentialed. I could maybe try to go through work. I could maybe try to go to like a public viewing thing, right, that they do outside of the arena. I was looking forward to the possibility of like maybe going and experiencing what it's like to be around a Stanley Cup, because Lord knows we have not gotten to experience that in our lifetimes here as Flyers fans. 2010 is like the one standout, except I wasn't around for that. I was in Berlin trying to watch the Stanley Cup Final on some site that was definitely a legal site for streaming NHL games in Germany. So I didn't get to experience what that's like. I got to experience what it's like to be in Europe while the World Cup is happening, which is very cool, but also very different. So I was actually kind of rooting for the Leafs. But I knew in my heart of hearts they had no chance. I knew they were screwed because it's now 7 straight Game 7s that Toronto has lost. 7 straight Game 7s. And on the flip side, Paul Maurice is now, I think, 6-0 all-time in Game 7s as a coach, which is right up there with DeBoer, is he at 8-0, 7-0 all-time in Game 7s? He got that with the Dallas win, right? So I knew last night Toronto had no shot. The amount of pressure that's put on the Toronto players by the Toronto media and by the Toronto fan base, they were going to come up small, and they did. And I tweeted about it last night that I think it is one of the biggest Game 7 choke jobs in NHL history. And like, that's not to be hyperbolic, but it is true. Because what happened last night, and the fact that they blew a 2-0 series lead to get to this point, it just felt like they were not ready to meet the moment. And in fairness, this core, or whatever you want to call it, that consists of Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and John Tavares, just hasn't worked. It's been a really good regular season team, but it's not a team that gets it done in the postseason. It's a regular season team that can compete with anybody in the league, but when it becomes like nut crunching time, like, they don't have it. Now, you could blame Mitch Marner, which is what a lot of people wanted to do last night, because there's the clip of him. Let me see if I can. I'll see if I can wrangle it here and prepare myself for the inevitable appeal for playing it on the show. But you have Mitch Marner last night getting into it with his teammates and like getting very animated with his teammates on the bench. And I looked at it and I said, I'm pretty sure that like, if you're a Flyers fan and you're thinking about like, do you want to see the Flyers extend an offer of $10, $11, $12 million a year for this guy? Is this the kind of thing you want to see? And like, you know, Bleacher Report put this out yesterday. Let's turn this off. Bleacher Report put this out last night, but like, this was the clip. He goes over to the bench and he says, "Wake the fuck up." Now, This comes, after the third goal gets scored. Now, mind you, Florida scored 3 goals in 6 minutes of game time, which was mind-numbing. And in fact, if you fast forward a little bit to later in the game, Florida's up 4-1. They're showing a replay, and while the replay is going on, the announcer says, oh, Bennett just put the puck in the back of the net. It's now 5-1. Because TNT's broadcast somehow didn't cut out of the replay to show you the live action on a face-off, and it made it 5-1. But you see Marner go over to the bench, and on one hand you go, okay, if you're Mitch Marner, is it a good look for you to go yell at your teammates? Well, it does show some passion, and it does show some anger, and it does show that you give a shit. However, I will point one thing out, and I'm going to try to do it here with a little bit of a frozen screen. Let's see if we can get this guy pulled up here. I want you to look at Mitch Marner. What's the thing that stands out here? What's the thing that stands out about the optics here, the aesthetics of Mitch Marner right here? What do you notice? Right? Because Florida has just scored 3 goals, right? And this isn't between periods. This is right after the third goal gets scored. What do you notice? And if you don't notice it, I'm about to highlight it for you, okay? I want you to look right here. I want you to look at this flow right here, okay? Now, I'm a guy who appreciates a good flow. You can't tell because it looks like I've got, slick back, messy hair right now. I was getting accusations in the comments earlier about putting grease in my hair. Now, this is probably going to look worse. This is not up to my standard. But let's just imagine for a second. Let's go over here, a little bit here, a little bit this. Okay. I respect somebody who's got longer hair, and it looks lovely, and it's coiffed and good on him. But what's the problem here? If you've been wearing a helmet and you've been exerting maximum effort, you're 2 periods into the game, or a period and a half into the game. Your hair shouldn't look this fluffy. It shouldn't look this textured. Your hair should look greasy and sweaty. You should look like a mess. And yet this is wonderfully light, floofy, and coiffed. In fact, I saw a lot of people in Fort Lauderdale walking around with hair like this at nice restaurants. And so I guess the question is it the right thing to do? Is it the right thing to get in the face of your teammates and tell them to wake the fuck up when it looks like you've physically exerted little to no effort because you've got still very light and floofy hair? Now, I don't know. Am I crazy for feeling like optically that's not a great look? I don't know. I mean, my hair looks like shit right now, but you could almost make the case that by virtue of my hair looking so shiny right now, it looks like I might have been working up a sweat before this show over on the workout bench over there, more so than he did playing in a Game 7 of a Stanley Cup game that has the chance to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, I don't know. That's just one thought that I would have. But I did like the passion. I was actually willing to look past the lack of perspiration on the forehead and in the hair and say, he's got it down. Now, I am going to go to the comments because I brought this up. And I want to see. Jason Franklin says, Marner fronting last night. Anthony DeGrazio says, at what point in the period is that? Because that hair is awfully dry. Andrew Fawcett doesn't appreciate the fact that he doesn't have a playoff beard. I'm trying to see real quick. Did he have a little? No. He had a little bit on his chinny chin, I think. But that was about it. I think he might have had the makings of a little bit of a goatee here. Obi-Wan says, I notice he looks like he's got real soft hands. Amadeo says, it's a nice flow. Derek Lentz says he looks like Shaun White. He does kind of look like Shaun White. DeGrazio says, where's the sweat? Obi-Wan says, you're supposed to be sweaty and stinky. Derek Lentz, if you don't sweat, we don't want you on the Flyers. Jim Cochran says he must use conditioner. Average Warzone guy says, I don't care what his hair looks like. I just don't want the Flyers to be the team that gives him a 7-year deal for 12.5 or more AAV. Amy says, lead by doing, he didn't show up either. Ethan Schumann over on YouTube says, overpaying for Marner would set the franchise back for years. Kenny Powers mullet does not like the hair slander. Says it's a silly argument. A ton of guys will look similar if you take their buckets off. Drenched Guys with drenched hair often wet it themselves. I don't know, Kenny Powers mullet. I don't know. Michael Mistichelli says, we don't need to overpay for a playoff choke artist in Philly. So this actually does kind of bring me back around to something, though, because I think that it's like important to kind of set the record straight on one thing, right? So there's this belief out there. There is a narrative out there that Mitch Marner doesn't perform in the playoffs. And if you look at this postseason, and especially if you looked at the last 5 games of what happened against the Panthers, he had 3 total points. He had they were all assists. He had 3 assists in the last 5 games of that series. He had 1 point over the last 3 games. So if you want to look at games 5, 6, and 7, he had 1 point. It was 1 assist. And if that were to happen in Philadelphia, he would get dragged. He would get absolutely hammered by this fan base. And yet, allow me to just make a real quick pitch to you on why Mitch Marner might not be as bad as people want to make him out to be. Okay, and I get it. I get where everybody's at. This postseason, Toronto played 13 games. Mitch Marner had 13 points. That makes him a point-per-game player. Last season was an awful, awful performance by Toronto. They played 7 games. He had 3 points. Okay. Go back 2 postseasons. Go back to the 2022-23 season. 11 games played. He had 14 points, 3 goals, 11 assists. You go back to the postseason before that. They only played 7 games. He had 8 points. So he's roughly been, over these last 4 postseasons, has been somewhere around a point-per-game player. Sometimes over, and last postseason he was under. But this idea that he is a career playoff choke artist, I don't think is exactly fair. I will also note that in all the postseason series that he has going back to 2016, 2017, he has played in 70 games in the postseason. He has 63 points across those 70 games, which again, on aggregate, takes him to almost being a point-per-game player in the postseason. Now, you might think that that's totally unacceptable, and that makes him still a shitty player, because if you look at his regular season numbers, he is significantly better than that and always has been significantly better than that. In fact, in 657 games in the regular season in his career, he has 741 points. That is well above a point-per-game player. You can make that case. You can also point to the fact that he had 102 points this season in 81 games and say, well, if he had 102 points in the regular season, how is he only a point-per-game player in the postseason? I would still argue that is valuable production. Now, would it be valuable production if the guy is getting paid $12.5, $13 million on a 7-year contract? No. You would get destroyed by the Philly media and fans alike for underproducing. But if you look at his career, if you look at his production with Toronto, if we look at his last 4 seasons, he has averaged, or he's been at or near 100 points 3 out of those 4 seasons. 102 points this season. In the 2022-23 season, he had 99 points. The year before, he had 97 points. You go back to 2018-2019, he had 94 points. Now, there were back-to-back seasons where he only had 67 points, but he only played 59 and 55 games respectively. And even in the 2021-22 season, he had 97 points. He did that in 72 games. All this is to say, Marner can produce for you at least in the regular season, and he can be potentially a point-per-game guy for you in the playoffs. If we remove the Maple Leafs of it all, right? If we just look at the production on paper, is that an immediate upgrade to the Philadelphia Flyers? The answer is very clearly yes. Now, again, there is this prevailing notion out there that Marner is an underperformer and that Marner doesn't get it done in the playoffs when it matters the most. And at 28 years of age, does he really fit the timeline? We just hired Rick Tocchet. They very clearly are looking to go gangbusters in free agency in 2026. Does getting a Mitch Marner help you entice a potential unrestricted free agent in 2026? It could. Now, I've said a bunch of times, I think Danny Briere is going to be very aggressive this offseason. I don't necessarily think that Mitch Marner is going to be Danny Briere's target. In fact, I would say it's more likely you see Briere go after a restricted free agent, a younger player, knowing that you would have to give up that first-round pick next year, and we saw what happened with the Islanders, and we saw what happened with Utah, with two teams having that kind of anomalous rise in the draft, and that teams like the Flyers just might think it's a terrible idea to potentially give away a first-round pick, and you never know how your season's going to go. I get that. But I think they'd be more likely to go that route and look for somebody who's in the 23, 24-year-old range than a 28-year-old who can help you right now and maybe does help you make the playoffs next year and maybe can help entice a free agent. I just don't know if I see Briere saying, yeah, that 28-year-old, and in fairness, he just turned 28 like 2 weeks ago. We want to give that 28-year-old $13 million a year for 7 years. I'm not exactly sure that that's the kind of business he wants to do. But would I expect to hear that the Flyers are trying to get a meeting with Mitch Marner? Could I see a scenario where there's a conversation had among the Flyers front office where they say, yeah, he's certainly worth having a conversation with? I would think so. Again, I think the Flyers are going to kind of exhaust every avenue here. I would fully expect that you're going to hear them involved in trade negotiations. And again, I think that they're going to be, in some way, shape, or form, involved in some of the UFAs that are out there. Now, the other guy that people have brought up is Sam Bennett. I will note that last week I brought up the name John Tavares, and I don't think that Tavares is going to be like a realistic target for the Flyers. I don't think that you're going to see the Flyers be able to woo him out of Toronto. The only way that a John Tavares hits free agency, the only way that he leaves Toronto is if they tell him in no uncertain terms they don't want him back. And I don't see that happening. I think that would be a disaster class for Toronto. And I think that when you have a guy whose dream was always to play for his hometown team and has been producing for you, if Toronto lets both Marner and Tavares leave, I don't know where that leaves them as a team. So I would expect that Tavares is going to be back. Now, there were some people who were like kind of douchey about this, but like when I threw out the idea last week, there was people who were like, well, John Tavares, why do we want to bring a 35-year-old center in the midst of a rebuild? Why would we do that? Why would the Flyers decide that's a good idea, Russ? Why would they decide that, Russ? Why would the Flyers get in the John Tavares business, Russ? And I was like, well, it's kind of simple, right? You need to have a good center to play with Matvei Michkov. It's not about finding a guy that's going to be able to play with Michkov for the next 10 years because that guy I thought was Wyatt Johnston, and he re-upped with Dallas. They could potentially try to make a move, but keep in mind, young centers that are on the come-up, they don't usually hit unrestricted free agency. And if you're going to go out and get them in a trade, it's going to cost you a lot. So why do I say John Tavares? Because Tavares this year had 74 points in 75 games and put up 38 goals and 36 assists. And so, like, if I'm the Flyers, right? Let's just say, hypothetically, they're able to clear the money, they're able to move the money. You can lock into Mitch Marner for 7 years at a $13 million AAV. And you're hoping that he's going to be that 100-point-per-game player, or very close to it. Sorry, not per game. That 100-point player over the course of a season. Do I, if I'm the Flyers, and I'm looking at this, see, like the computer already knew where I was going. Do I want to invest that kind of money at that kind of term for Mitch Marner? Or do I say, you know what? There's a really good chance that John Tavares could have a legitimately good impact on Matvei Michkov. And do I consider saying, all right, if he would take, let's say, $7 million to stay in Toronto, and let me take a gander really quick at what his current deal is, because I honestly don't know what his AAV is right now. But like, let's say Tavares we're going to consider taking $7 million to stay in Toronto, and that's totally based on the idea that Toronto is going to want to keep him and that everybody's happy and everything's hunky-dory. Let's see. Can I find... Oh, they already moved it up a year. I can't find his salary. I'll have to look for it. I don't know what Tavares' salary is right now. That's my fault, guys. I'm sorry. I've let the whole team down. I'll see if I can find it while talking. But if he's going to take $7 million to stay in Toronto or consider staying in Toronto for 7, don't you then, if you're the Flyers, say, we'll give you 9.5 for like 2 years? There we go. Amadeo. $11 million. He's not going to get $11 million on another deal at age 35. Like there's practically, or he's 34. At 34 years of age, he's not getting $11 million. So if on the open market, it would say like he's going to get around 9, even with the cap going up, the law of diminishing returns, like I don't think he'll get 11. If he would take 7, maybe 8 to stay in Toronto, if you're the Flyers, you say, yo, we'll give you 2 years or 3 years at $10 million. I think that's a better investment for the Flyers. If they came out gangbusters this offseason and said our number one priority is to get a legitimate star center, even though his best years are probably somewhat behind him, a guy who could still be around a point per game center in this league, and a guy who's been around 80 points for 3 out of the last 4 years, I think that guy's more valuable. Now, again, Marner getting like 13 and a half over 7 years versus Tavares getting $10 million over 2 or 3 years. I think that's the smarter business for the Flyers. It doesn't mean that it would work. It also doesn't mean that if you're Tavares that you'd have any interest in it. But if you're looking at a team that you could help build back into being a playoff contender, and that, oh, by the way, next year might be much more involved in free agency, plays in a very good market, and presumably plays for a coach that guys like Quinn Hughes have had glowing reviews about in Rick Tocchet, do you consider it? I don't know. I have no idea. I like the idea of Tavares on a short-term deal with a higher AAV than he's probably worth right now. If for no other reason than I think it helps Mishkov. And that should be your number one goal as an organization. How do we maximize Matvei Mishkov? Okay. Now, the name Sam Bennett has also been thrown around. And if you look at what Sam Bennett has been to this point in his career, and if you take a look at like what he's been as a playoff performer, he's not quite a point-per-game guy this postseason. And over the course of his career, it's like a 2 out of 3 games with a point kind of pace. He's a very good player. He would certainly help this team. At 28 years of age, he would also probably help. And he plays center. And maybe he's the guy that you want to consider going after and helping to maximize Matvei Mishkov. But I have a really hard time believing if Florida ends up winning another cup, are you going to walk away from that team? Like, sure, the Flyers might be able to offer him $10 million, $11 million for a long-term deal. He has to pay tax. If the Panthers were to come to him with a $9 million per year offer, and you're already at the pinnacle of the sport, and again, if they win a second cup in a row, you're talking about a potential dynasty. I don't think he's walking away from that situation. And it comes back to one of the questions from way earlier in the show, but like, why do people keep having these conversations about good players, very good players leaving great situations to come here? That's why I don't think Bennett is a realistic option. Now, if the Panthers flame out in the next round, or if the Panthers are so cap-strapped or they decide, listen, we love having you here, we love everything that you've done, but we can't figure out a way to make this work, and he does test free agency, well then yeah, the Flyers have to consider going after him. They'd be stupid not to. If you're the Flyers and you can try to woo this guy into town, like, you consider it. But I will point out that, like, on the whole, he isn't going to impress you from a point production standpoint. So, like, where Tavares, you go 30-plus goals, 30-plus assists, can teach Mishkov how to be a pro, can instill some, like, good traits into Mishkov, can maybe help him find that next level. I'm not sure Bennett does that. Now, again, they're at different points in their career. Tavares is 7 years older. If we're being realistic, I think Marner will leave Toronto, and I think it's more likely than not that Bennett and Tavares remain in Florida and Toronto, respectively. But I do think that it's worth the conversation, and I think that ultimately you're going to see the Flyers get involved. And that's not a bad thing. After all these years of just kind of floating in these like waters of mediocrity, it's kind of nice to think that for once the Flyers might actually get involved and get interesting again. This is why I keep telling you the best bet in sports right now is on the Flyers to make the playoffs next year. Even though they don't have a number one goalie, they don't have a number one center, and they don't have a true number one defenseman. I still think that in a dog shit Eastern Conference that was full of parity, there's a better than not chance they're going to make the playoffs next year. But you can clip this. I mean, I'm not going to be able to run away from these quotes. I'm very much on record on this show and on Snow the Goalie saying, I think they're going to make the playoffs next year. We'll see if I'm right or not. By the way, if Danny Briere doesn't like fundamentally upend part of this roster, if like Briere doesn't go out and like make some moves and they run it back with the same squad, they miss the playoffs, I'm going to be more mad at him than I am at myself for saying that they were going to make the playoffs next year. So you got that. Let's see. George W. Bush says, hey, Russ, how you doing from Texas? We don't need Marner, but I can see a scenario where Tavares makes sense as a short-term solution to our center problems. That's good strategy, George W. No, it is. I agree. I think it makes a lot of sense. David Daniel over on YouTube says, Marner is a punk. Bennett is a legend. Okay. Average Warzone guy says, people in Toronto should be more mad at Matthews this year than Marner. Listen, I think that a lot of the burden falls onto the captain. And he said, now in his post-game comments, Matthews said that the guys were ready to play all that. And then he eventually said that ultimately they had too many passengers, which is not a great sign, but some of that falls on the coach and some of that falls on the leadership of the team. You've got to get your guys going. And it seemed like he did not. Tony Louis says the whole free agent class this offseason is extremely underwhelming. There isn't a good fit for this team in the free agent class. Save that money for 2026. We'll see. We'll see. Anthony DeGrazio asks, do we even remember what the playoffs feel like? No. I think it's a long... Listen, being in the playoffs in that building is a hell of an atmosphere, as long as the team is winning. When the team starts losing, it gets very quiet. But I miss those days. I really do. I truly miss having playoff hockey in the city. JT says, we didn't even make the playoffs. Get a 100-point scorer when you can. It's a fair way to look at it. I don't think that the listen, I think that ultimately, like the Marner stuff, he is an absolute immediate upgrade to your team if you're able to get him. Without a doubt. Like to me, there's no debate. He is an upgrade for the Flyers. Does he raise their ceiling to a point where next year in 2026 and you hit free agency there, it's enough to woo one of the studs next offseason? Like everybody's going to joke about Connor McDavid, but like when you're trying to actually go out and go big fish hunting, does Marner move things forward enough that a marquee free agent, like a potential franchise-shifting player, ultimately says, I wasn't considering the Flyers, but that's the move that did it? Probably not. Probably not. Now, Mishkov taking another step forward could be that, which is, again, kind of like why I'm all in on this like idea, as unlikely as it may be. Getting a Tavares in here and seeing Mishkov hit that next level, maybe that's intriguing to a free agent in 2026, but we'll see. Let's see. I don't even know what voices I did here, but Timeout likes them, so thank you, Timeout. I appreciate that. Obi-Wan says, I hate Tavares, but he's kind of like really good at hockey. Yes, that is correct. All right, let me see if I can catch up on some of the stuff here. AJ Snap over on YouTube, our resident Rangers fan, says, I got to say, after switching coaches so many times, the problem is clearly the mental game of Toronto's core four. They're absolutely going to move on from at least one of them this year. I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if they move on from like 2+. Let's see. And then Andrew Fawcett says about the passengers line, he thinks that Matthews was also one of those guys. I will also bring up really quickly, there was a reporter who put out a thing last night that said, wow, Toronto gave up a first-round pick for Scott Laughton. I will be damned if I don't at least make a somewhat cogent argument here that Laughton might have been one of the best players on ice for Toronto last night. Legitimately. I think he was one of the only guys that was mentally checked into that game and was giving it his all. While a bunch of Toronto guys wilted under the pressure and the bright lights, Laughton, I thought, stepped up and played really well. Now, he did kind of didn't screw himself in the team, but like he did have that breakaway early in the game that Bobrovsky stopped. They had multiple breakaways in the first period that they didn't score on, and that's when I knew. I went into it expecting Florida to win, but multiple breakaway stops, not being able to convert, that pretty much summed it up. Let's see. Average Work Zone guy says, Ekblad on a 7-year, $8 million deal. Lock it in. Briere is going to claim he found the 1D we need. Ekblad would be an upgrade. I know there's sarcasm in that, so I don't know. Jamie Calvario says, I heard Lawton's name more last night than anyone else. Yeah, I mean, Lawton played a really good game. It wasn't perfect, but Scott Lawton's game isn't perfect. It is kind of on the edge. It is ugly sometimes, but sometimes you need those kind of players. That's part of why Toronto went out and got him in the first place. Steven says, I forgot you were live. Steven, hello. We're live. Changed hairstyles partway through the show, just to make a point about Mitch Marner, and, here we are. All right, I think that's probably as far as I want to go. But Jay says, being a Toronto reporter in 2025 tells you all you need to know about their opinions and choices. Who cares what they think about my alternate captain? Steven also asks, any word on Rick's assistant coaches yet? No. I've heard nothing about the Tocchet coaching staff yet. So, I'm good on the hockey talk for now. That lasted much longer than I intended. I do want to get to the two other teams in town that are worth talking about right now. That does not include Daryl Morey apparently shopping the number 3 overall pick, which makes me want to punch myself in the face. And I don't want to punch myself in the face, but talking about Daryl Morey gets me pretty damn close. I don't want to think about passing up on a guy like Ace Bailey. I don't want to think about trading back to draft a guy named Knipple. I don't want to think about having to attach the number 3 pick just to move Paul George's contract. I don't want to have those conversations yet. I'm already upset enough with what happened in the Sixers season to have to start thinking about how they're going to somehow make the wrong decision, and instead of trying to fortify a young nucleus, they're going to try to build around at least one very broken down player, if not 2, to save Daryl Morey's job. I can't go there yet. It'll make me too sad, and I don't want to be sad on a marvelous Monday, okay? All right, so let me then take you to the bit of news that came out today that is encouraging news, and then we'll get to the news that made everybody sad. So first, let's... JH is right. It's a special kind of stupid. I want to go to the thing that broke earlier today, which is that the Eagles extended Nick Sirianni, and it is an absolutely smart move. And I will not shy away from the fact that, as many of you know, I questioned very loudly last season, well, I guess 2 seasons ago, right? Not this past one where they just won the Super Bowl, the season before. When the Eagles fell apart down the stretch 2 years ago, I openly questioned what the hell was happening in the locker room and how the head coach survives it. And then I gave him the offseason and said, all right, you really have to patch things up with the quarterback. And we saw and heard a couple of things that were like a little bit iffy last summer. And then we saw the thing like where they were zooming around on the golf cart together, and it was like, all right, this kind of feels like kind of gaslighting the fans and believing that there's a strong relationship there. Okay. And then we saw what happened early in the season where the Eagles didn't start out incredibly strong. And by the time they hit the bye week, there were rumors going around that Bill Belichick was still monitoring the Eagles situation and the Cowboys situation. And I said at that point that based on the fact that there were some issues going on in the locker room, remember there was the Slay and CJ thing. There were things kind of getting out that some of the wounds from the prior season hadn't been healed. I started going, all right, like, I don't know, it's time to make a head coaching change, because if you put together the tanking from the year before, or the tanking of the season, they didn't intentionally tank, but the slide they went on, and then how it looked like nothing had really been rectified going into last season, I was like, all right, maybe it's time for a head coaching change. And I kept questioning, what does Nick Sirianni do? Like, what is his job? Because if Kellen Moore runs the offense and Vic Fangio runs the defense, and Sirianni doesn't have much of a say in either, then what is the point? Is it to be a glorified cheerleader? All those things, you can find them on this channel. You can find them in the podcast feed. You can clip them up. You can attack me for my thoughts. But I thought that I was fair about the assessment. And then the Eagles came out of the bye week, and they played incredibly well. And this Eagles team, despite still having some personality issues on the team, they put together one hell of a run, and they took the city on the ride to the second ever Super Bowl win in franchise history. And a lot of that was because of Nick Sirianni. Now, I do still openly question, what is it that you do here? But it's hard to argue the success, and it's hard to argue the fact that this team has a legitimate dynasty window currently open right now. And barring health, we'll have that window open for the next few seasons. And it would be asinine to say that Sirianni had nothing to do with it. And it would be disingenuous for me to argue that, like, well, it has nothing to do with him. It does. It has to. He's built a good culture in that locker room. He's helped to, and we've seen guys come out, as things were getting better last season and then into the playoffs and around the Super Bowl. You have a lot of guys just saying he holds that team together. They go by the beat of his drum. There was the moment where he was barking at fans in the crowd early in the season. I was like, that's not a great look. And you take that and you add it to the Kansas City, like at Kansas City, where you at, Chiefs fans, like that kind of stuff. And you go, maybe a little bit too much. But on the whole, the players seem to like him, respect him. If nothing else, they play for him. And they find incredible results. He has the third best winning percentage in NFL history for coaches who have coached at least 50 games. That's not a fluke. And yes, he's had talented teams that he's gotten to oversee. But that isn't all just on the players. And keep in mind, there are a lot of very talented teams in the National Football League that don't make it to a Super Bowl and that certainly don't win a Super Bowl. So he gets the extension today. And I want to just throw a quote up here from the Eagles chairman and CEO, Jeffrey Lurie, explaining why they decided to extend Nick Sirianni, which honestly should come as no shock coming off of a Super Bowl win. But Jeffrey Lurie says the following: as an organization, we have always strived to create a championship culture of sustained success. Nothing is more important to fostering such an environment than having tremendous leadership. Nick has embodied everything we were looking for in a head coach since we hired him 4 years ago. His authentic style of leadership, football intelligence, passion for the game, and growth mindset have helped to bring out the best in our team. I am excited for what the future holds for the Philadelphia Eagles. Pretty much nails it all. And so it shouldn't come as a surprise that Sirianni gets this extension. It shouldn't come as a surprise that he gets a multi-year deal. I don't think the details of the contract have come out. I don't really expect them to come out. The Eagles typically do a very good job of kind of keeping the non-player salary stuff sort of hidden from the public. But he has been fantastic. And while there are certainly some moments that have been rough, there have certainly been some patches that this team has gone through where you go, the fuck is he doing? What is he saying? You go back to his introductory press conference where he was kind of stuttering and kind of falling all over himself. The guy's a winner, and he has been a breath of fresh air in a league that has a lot of coach speak. He hits you with that sometimes, but for the most part, you feel like he is a genuinely good dude, and you get the feeling that his players really do like playing for him, and that matters. We'll also point out the fact that in NFL history, he now has the second most wins of a head coach across their first 4 seasons, including the postseason. He's got 54. So second best in league history. I would have to say that's pretty damn good. Now, it doesn't invalidate some of the criticism. It doesn't invalidate some of the questions around his role, but it is a very well-deserved contract. 2 Super Bowl appearances in 3 years will do that. And getting to hoist that Lombardi trophy, yeah, it's pretty important, pretty impressive. JH says, I was a fire Sirianni truther. I'll admit it. Ford says, people calling for Sirianni to be fired. Now he's a Super Bowl winner and extended. What a country. It's true. We were talking about Italians. You got Big Dom. We're not gonna bring up the Ivanka tweet where she's thanking Big Dom for the support of her son's team. But Mr. Bone 99, keeping the Italian theme going, says, sorry I'm late. How was the Italian festival? We made a last-minute decision to go to the Italian Market Festival on Saturday. Somebody that I work with from another company that I was talking to down in Florida was like, you go to the Italian Festival? I was like, no, I've never been there. She was like, have you never gone? I said, well, I'll figure it out. And so we packed up the kids, packed everything up. We went down to, was it South 9th Street? And I knew it was going to be chaotic and there were going to be a lot of people. and I knew that there was like the greased pole that people like kind of climb on each other to try to reach the meat or whatever at the top of the pole. We took a stroller, which we never do. And I would never recommend taking a stroller to the Italian Market Festival ever again. I had my daughter on our shoulders. I had our 2-year-old in the stroller in front of me. Our 2 sons were behind me in front of my wife. We tried to do single file. It was kind of a mess, but it was a great time. And kind of getting to, go to this shop, go to that shop, grab some food, grab a little bit. The only downside is I told my dad that I was going to try to find him something. My dad, good full-blooded Italian guy. I was like, I'll try to find you something at the market. It was so unbelievably crowded and so unbelievably packed and also so unbelievably hot that we walked away with nada for my dad. And unfortunately, my dad calls me like 20 minutes before I started the show and said, hey, did you get me anything at the festival? And I had to say, no, Dad, I'm sorry, I didn't. And I felt bad. I felt bad about it. And I still feel bad about it. He's not going to watch the show, but if he is, sorry, Dad. I'm sorry. Last thing, and speaking of I'm sorry is the thing that young Jose Alvarado should be saying to each and every Phillies fan. Because as we all know, Jose Alvarado got himself suspended. And it wasn't for what you might have expected. Now, in fairness, Jose Alvarado came into the season looking a little bit slimmer. Jose Alvarado came into like spring training throwing 102 miles an hour. He had that beautiful moment last week, the week before, where he had the note, I love you, Mom, on his hat. People loved that. We can even go to this clip from spring training where Jose Alvarado noted that he feels like a fat boy. Here, let's go to that real quick because this actually was one of my favorite quotes from spring training. Let me see. Can I find it? This is spring training last year. Let me see if I can find it because Alvarado's always been a big guy. We know Alvarado's a big guy. Let me just throw this out to Alvarado really quick. This is his thing.
Is that the key for any pitcher, though, Jose, is make sure your legs are strong?
I am the grizzly bear. Yeah, you are.
So he called himself a grizzly bear. We love that because he does kind of look, he's a big guy, big boy, looks like a grizzly bear. Okay.
I am the grizzly bear. I got, sometimes I call to my people in the clubhouse, bro, I feel like a fat boy, I'm fucking fat.
I feel like a fat boy. I am fucking fat. Listen, Jose Alvarado is a dude, I'd happily go get a drink with Jose Alvarado. Seems like a good dude. He was off to a great start this season. He's been one of the only bullpen pieces that you can actually trust. And now he's suspended. He's suspended for 80 games. 80. And not only is he suspended 80 games, because if you do the mental math, he in theory would have been able to return for the postseason. Being a first-time PED user, he's also suspended for the playoffs. So he is DUN done. It is all over, right? And I think that it stinks. And it stinks especially because Dave Dombrowski didn't do enough in the offseason to address the bullpen. And so now you have an even bigger gaping hole in the bullpen, which now has led everybody and their mother to start asking, is it time for Ranger Suarez to fill that spot in the bullpen? And you could make a case. Sure. Ranger Suarez could be a very good bullpen arm. And in theory, you could maybe keep Mick Abel in the rotation. He's taken Nola's spot in the rotation. They have Andrew Painter, who presumably there was a belief was going to end up being on this roster for the second half of the season. Do they do a stopgap until then? I don't know how you move Ranger out of the rotation right now until Painter's ready to come up. But what this Alvarado suspension has done is really kind of put the proverbial gun to the head of the Phillies, because you either have to go out and acquire an arm at a much higher, it's going to cost you so much more to get a bullpen arm, right? Because every team in baseball knows you need one now. It was one thing when the bullpen stinks, but we might be able to survive it. Now it's the bullpen stinks. We were trying to survive it. And oh, by the way, our most reliable reliever is now gone. That's a legitimate issue. And it puts Dombrowski and the Phillies in a very, very tough place because they have to address this. They have to address the spot in the bullpen. Now, I do want to get to the quotes, though, because we were talking about Alvarado getting suspended, and it was, it says it was testosterone. Dave Dombrowski talked to the assembled media yesterday to address it, and he tried to give some context on what it was that Alvarado took. I don't know if he's trying to go for the sympathy play here, but we're going to listen to Dave Dombrowski, and then we'll kind of bring it back, and then we'll wrap the show. So here's Dave Dombrowski about what happened with Jose Alvarado and what they think happened and why he tested positive for testosterone.
Thanks on the season.
Well, it's disappointing for sure. I mean, there's no question about that. We've had other issues that come up at various times. To me, I end up treating it like an injury. Is really what it is, because you need to replace somebody for 80 games, and then hopefully into the postseason he's not eligible for that time period. It's not something he did knowingly. I believe that, the way he talked to me. We had our support. It's basically the system is a very stringent system, because in the sense that you're responsible for what goes in your body.
That's simple. You're responsible for what goes in your body. We'll keep going.
That's what it really comes down to. And so I know what he was doing. He was trying to take a weight loss reduction.
A weight loss reduction. Is that Ozempic? You know. Say it ain't so, Alvarado. No way, Jose. Was he taking Ozempic? Did that spike his testosterone? Okay.
That's what he's always been self-conscious of his weight and working hard on it. And something he took gave a positive result. So, but ultimately it's a situation where if that happens, you're still responsible for it.
So Mr. Rogers here. We love Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers kind of gives you a word salad. But, all right, so recap. This is if we are to believe what Dombrowski said, which I don't know. He says that Alvarado tested positive for testosterone because he was taking a weight loss drug, and he's always been very self-conscious about his weight. All right, so let's look at it at a human level. Should Jose Alvarado have been self-conscious about his weight? Sure. I mean, he's a big boy. He doesn't look like a skinny pitcher. He's not. And maybe he has struggled with his image. And to that end, I get it. I actually feel bad for the guy. That if he's making the kind of money that he's making and he's playing on one of the best teams in the National League and the best baseball league in the world, that he still feels self-conscious about himself. On a human level, I get that. I feel bad for the guy. But I don't believe that he just started taking whatever this injection or this pill or whatever it was, this weight loss drug. I don't believe this just happened in the last month, right? And so there's a part of me that while I get it and I feel bad, part of me just kind of openly questions, how long has Jose Alvarado been on whatever this medication is? And if it's been longer than a month, let's say it's been 3 months, has it been 6 months? Has it been throughout the off season? When did this test come through, and when did it spike? Were there multiple tests before it that showed trace amounts of something, and it flagged something within the league system, and that's what led to this ultimate test that got him suspended for 80 games and the playoffs? I don't know. I'm very much of the mentality that if you play in a professional sports league, right, you without a doubt, you put anything in your body, you check with the team, you check with the medical team. You check with the training staff. You make sure it gets vetted by Major League Baseball. What the fuck are you doing? If you're a pro athlete and you're doing anything that isn't fully on the up and up, why would you not get that checked, right? I was on a work trip last week. I checked the most minute policy about what kind of Uber, down to the class of Uber, what kind of Uber can I expense? Because I'm a responsible human being. I'm not making millions of dollars to do my job. I'm not playing in Major League Baseball. If you're going to take something new, make sure that it's approved. What are we doing here? And it almost makes me wonder, okay, there are masking agents for all kinds of different supplements, right? And this is always a scandal. If you talk to people who are professional bodybuilders, this is a known thing. if you talk to people who play specific sports, there are masking agents that can be taken that kind of cover up what you may be taking. Did Jose Alvarado like just screw up? Like, did he miss something? Was he taking this weight loss drug? Again, assuming, we'll take them at their word, that it's a weight loss drug. Was he taking this for like the better part of a year? And he's had like a masking agent with it this entire time, and oops-a-daisy, forgot to take it this last time, and that's what caught the attention of Major League Baseball? Or was it really he started taking like Ozempic or something a month ago and thought nothing of it because there are commercials for it running during baseball games and thought, okay, I can take this. This is okay. And if it's that one, right, I will meet the Phillies at Dombrowski told the truth. Let's imagine Alvarado started taking Ozempic or something like it a month ago. Thought there's no reason this shouldn't be approved. Jabbed himself or whatever the hell you do with Ozempic. And was like, I'm fine. And then he got suspended. That's a shame. It's a shame on multiple levels, including the fact that it's such a readily available and publicly like part of the lexicon now. Everybody knows what Ozempic is. That if that's the thing that like caused this spike and now he's suspended, that sucks. He still should have gotten it checked out. You're at a point now in professional sports where anything and everything can get flagged. He should have known better. And if the Phillies in any way, shape, or form, anybody, training staff, teammates, anybody was aware he was taking this stuff and was maybe getting away with it for 3 months, 6 months, 10 months, 12 months, they should have told him, you need to know better, you need to try harder. I don't necessarily find, this might be shocking, I don't totally find myself in the position often where I'm like upset about performance-enhancing drugs. I don't think they're great. I certainly don't think that youth sports, high school sports, college sports, anybody like that should try them, should take them. But if you're trying to recover from an injury and you take like HGH to help with the recovery process, do I think that is like the worst thing in the world? Maybe not. If you're Jose Alvarado and you're trying to lose weight, and now you got flagged in the system because you were trying to lose weight, because you were self-conscious, it's not a great look. You should have done better, but I don't hate the guy. I don't think that the guy is a colossal fuck-up as a human being. I think he made a really dumb choice, and not getting it vetted by the team and the league was ultimately a massive fuck-up, and it really did screw the Phillies in their efforts to try to bolster their bullpen and be a legitimate World Series team. But I'm not going to kill the guy because he might have made a mistake. Now, again, you have to be better than that. And if he was doing this for like a year and was doing this in tandem with a masking agent and he just like screwed up, then I'm mad at him. Because at that point, if you've been able to get away with it for that long and you were careless and you screwed it up and now you are suspended and can't play in the playoffs, that to me is actually the more egregious error. But maybe I'm wrong. Ford says, the reverse is also true. The team should be checking in on its players. Potential. Yeah. Let's see. Broken Bell Network says, exactly, your entire livelihood depends on following some pretty easy rules. Amy says, do these drugs contain testosterone that would raise his levels? I don't know. I really don't know. Let's see. Broken Bell also says the Phillies could have questioned his velocity. Otherwise, dude said he gave up rice and beans. Yeah, that's not great looking back at it. Joe Fisher says same thing happened to Lane Johnson. I don't remember. I feel like he actually had steroids, though. I feel like when Johnson got suspended, they called them steroids. It was a little bit different. We have a Mets fan, I believe, in the comments. Metropoli Jonathan says Jose Alvarado. That's actually pretty good. That is. I'm going to allow that one. Yeah. Like Alvarado Zempic is too long. Alvarado is pretty good. Let's see. Ford says that he thinks the Phillies are complicit too. I'm sure they have trainers monitoring these things, but whoops. Also, obviously, Jose has to take ownership. There is nuance. I agree. So to recap today's show. There are names that the Flyers could go after in the offseason, 2 of which are no longer playing, 1 of which is going to the Eastern Conference Final. Nick Sirianni got extended. Jose Alvarado got suspended. And Daryl Morey's still a dope, talking about trading the number 3 overall pick. Yeah, I think that sums it up. That sums up our show. I will be back on Wednesday with a new episode of The Russ Joy Show at a time to be determined. Might be 8:30, might not be. Who knows? It hasn't been 8:30 in like 3 or 4 weeks, but I'm afraid of commitment, and I'm not going to commit to a time. I have this like floating, roving time. It's just kind of like a wonderful little joyful notification you get whenever I go live. The show is available on podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. If you can, do me 2 favors. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, share the video, and subscribe because it legitimately helps. You can also comment, not in the live comments, but like the after the fact, when the stream is over, in the regular comments section. Commenting there helps as well, helps more people find the show. And if you do listen to the podcast feed, you can go over to Spotify, click on the show, and you can leave a rating. 5 stars would be great. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, you can not only leave a 5-star rating, but also a 5-star review. And leaving a review is very, very helpful. It helps other people find the show. And also, I will read it on the show. Now, I haven't looked for a while. Admittedly, I have not gone in. I don't use Apple Podcasts for the podcasts that I listen to because it doesn't have a 2.5 speed option. Spotify does, so I'm still kind of there. I haven't looked to see if there's a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. I can take a gander there really quick. There might be somebody with a 1-star who hates me. Oh, well, let's see. Hold on. There was a 5-star, but I read this one. It was from back in September. I would say like a good chunk of people who consume this show do so on YouTube. There is still a very nice listenership in the podcast feed, so I'll keep the podcast feed going. But a 5-star rating and a 5-star review would help a lot, so please do that if you have a chance. In the meantime, you can interact with me on social media, interact with the channel. Over on TikTok, we're at almost 1,000 followers, so you can go over on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, on YouTube Shorts. You can find this content everywhere. Video guy Amadeo just chopping it up, doing a great job. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it for today. Bus campers, I saw your question. Come back with that on Wednesday. I promise I'll answer it. In the meantime, this has been the Russ Joy Show. I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Talk to all of you on a wonderful Wednesday, but until then, have a marvelous Monday and a terrific Tuesday. And I'll talk to you Wednesday here on the Russ Joy Show. Bye now.